Greetings, we're back. The fastest growing podcast. This is podcast affirmation. Whole wide world. Sintswempu siyagijima ayanyuka ama-numbers. Today's visit leader boss Build One SA. Ifikile Build One SA iseThekwini ise-KZN all over. Mmusi
Baba.
sengithi Maimane. Kuhamba kanjani?
No, siyapusha school sam. We are literally, we are one of the fastest growing political parties in the country.
Like PA.
Baba.
Podcast affirmation.
Like PE. That's correct. So nina manikhula nathi siyabona ukuthi uyabona nje. No, I'm grateful and it's great to be in KZN. It's good to, being say Western Cape is 2 days ago, Gauteng is Wednesday, Sila, Limpopo. We are growing across the country.
So you can safely say it was a wise decision.
Yeah, yours, Baba, without being more bigger, so 2023. And as young South Africans, funeke sibe nento yethu ezokwenza ukuthi the future of this country masibheka sizothi one day nathi we can't just be drinking from the old wine skins in that sense. We can't literally be doing that. We have to sit down, sakhe into yethu. If you look at the politics of 94, and I don't want to, you've got Zulu parties, you've got colored parties, you've got white parties, you've got black parties. It represents a time in history that was necessary. Nathi funeke sibe nento yethu manje ezothi when our children and our great-grandchildren bebusa, they will say ukuthi this was the context of South Africa and now the vehicle that was built for its own future. That's what.
Perfect. Mmusi, ngifuna ukucheck la something. Understand that before singene kuyibhosa nokuthi melini nokuthi target bani and all that stuff. Mmusi ukhulele iphuzalo lepho wakhula kanjani? Siblings asekhona kwenzakalani?
Yeah, Mmusi awuthi yasekasi, ekasi laseSoweto.
Esoweto
baba, eDopsi. Sikhulele lapha, I'm one of 4.
Or eDobsonville.
eDobsonville baba. eLongthile. Abazi iDobsonville bazoyazi ukuthi iLongthile kuphi. iDobsonville yakudala. Hayi abo extension bani.
No.
Hile yezindlu
hardcore.
The core. So we come from literally eDobsonville. I'm the first of 4 children. Umamami was Eastern Cape. That's why.
So ungumXhosa.
Ndiyathetha isiXhosa bawo isiduko sakuthi wakwasidloyi. So ndingubomaduna otiba. So that's, and then ubabami isibongo sakithi, that's why we get to Maimane. Wakhule Northwest bahlangana eKasi eDopsi. They got married and had 4 children, of which I'm one. I have 2 sisters, and I have a brother.
Okay.
So that's where we grew up.
So was you look about recruiter born because your charity begins at home.
Even if you have a dog, my comforter funeke ithi boss.
Mayivuka ithi boss. Mayivuka ukuchecka lo ukuthi bona usukwazi lokuba recruit ukuthi bebevuka bathi boss abasho ukuthi whatever organization.
No, so we are going to register sonke literally next weekend. So no, there are family has always been supportive of our politics.
Oh, okay.
Even I think I've been grateful to have his benefit support. Family. We grew up besidlala ibhola lapha eDopsi, and so I'm a footballer by we grew up playing lapha. And even our club, I see some of the old players besidlala nabo. Now I'm recruiting them. They are next. I must get them ukuthi besidlala sonke. Then now they must go vote.
But mhlambe any question Mmusi, ngibona background yakho ilokish kakhulu. I understand the kwenzeka kanjani ke bese step into this thing ye-politics ukuthi nangu Mmusi bejoin i-organization. Have you been to a organization like njenge-ANC, ASAP, all these historical black organizations?
So khulula kwami eKasi, in all all of it. Beslala, we lived near a hostel, so we could understand the conflict between what was going on in Kasi at the time. I can't deny, regardless of my relationship with the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. But I understood our politics to always be sometimes a conflict between IFP and ANC.
ANC, yeah.
And Ekasi, this became the frame that we look at. And I always say to Abantu Uti, even if you weren't interested in politics, politics was interested in you. Because if you were a young man, you didn't have a choice. I always tell people, where's we and the petrol bomb before you could ride a bicycle? Because you needed to know what is going on.
Yeah.
And so my first political activism started literally in the 90s in that context. And the first branch I ever joined was a branch ANC from Edopsi, because we knew and understood Uguti, the release of Mandela in 90 and all of what was going on, the only thing we knew was the ANC. Of course, Amanyama comrades who were next to us, some of them were PAC guys. Abanye felt Uti, that was the struggle for Black South Africans. In fact, our neighbors were more Azapo people. That whole framing, so the politics of our streets were such politics. I won't say Uti, the ANC was always outwardly. The ANC was more synonymous no Mandela in that regard. And from Yiti to where Orlando, and it's not far from Etopsi. So the release of Mandela, and obviously all of what happened 94 post that, you knew Uti, this became the umbrella home that created it. But you can't change the fact.
So you knew more release Mandela campaign.
Yeah, you can't change the fact that even the period of 1990 to 1994 was probably one of the most violent, bloodiest periods. In fact, most people will tell you, Uti, from 1990 to 1994, more people died in that time than in all of apartheid. So let's place it in context, how violent that period is. That's why I'm saying you could not be politically alerted, active. You could not be. I was raised in a Catholic school by a Catholic nun, Sister Monica, and Sister Christina, to be correct. Sister Christina was a Black consciousness activist.
Yeah.
Besithi masifika esikolweni, I used to get to school 8 in the morning and leave at 5. The afternoon I would sit naye ofisini yakhe, and she would educate us about what it means to be proudly Black. Because some people confuse Black consciousness with the idea of saying what it's anti-white. Cannot be. It is an affirmation that Black is beautiful.
Yeah.
It is the notion that says we can stand and uphold our dignity. So Sister Christina would literally educate us and inculcate things. She would literally, even the way you would speak English. You've learned something.
Yeah.
So she gave us that confidence, and of course she was politically active, as many of the Catholic nuns are. So was Sister Bernard Ngube and many others. In fact, that was the frame within which Besalanga Corner. In fact, we used to have school closed because the police would come into the school, break down the office like and looking for documents, and you would have a day off at school. What did it all mean? But we could see something was abnormal. The state of emergency Ekasi was quite big. The first group of white
Have you been arrested?
No.
You like
No. We saw, I was in some ways young. I wasn't that young. If you saw what was going on with state,
but you were conscientized.
And I'm grateful because sometimes people say, no, you must have been steeped in the struggle. I'm also grateful for the time period I was born in. There were others who needed to fight 76. There were others who needed to forge away for 94. Tina, we needed to grow up understanding that You see, they say ukuthi anybody, mawukhula, your values become set. You look at the world the way you were growing up. And when I was growing up, I'm grateful ukuthi the first group of multiracial schools were starting to open up. You might think ukuthi, why does that matter? It matters because suddenly you could see that the enemy was not the color of the skin of white people. It was a system that excluded black people, which meant that black and white could fight to oppose the system. So when we write the history correctly, we will remind ourselves that there were many others like Ojo Slovo and many who fought the struggle. People like Ruth First, because they recognized that the struggle was against the system. That's what we learned. And at Tina, we then got to say, we're sitting in classrooms with white kids. Man, our intellect, we must not believe what the apartheid government would tell, that blacks are inferior.
Yeah.
We could sit now in classes to do that. Why? Because now your values come in.
So it's in Pasamates got the Mbaduli food. So
and even on the sports field, wherever.
Yeah.
So that one day when you come into leadership, you can say to yourself, no, man. When we lead, we must lead all South Africans. And know what we are comfortable and confident to build with all South Africans.
Yeah.
That's so it needed that.
So you were fighting on my injustices.
Correct.
At that particular time.
Correct.
Because at the ultimate end, even if my money no 80 million or billion, but back to white all get affected.
Yes.
So as a result, it was about fighting that thing, not color. Yeah, man.
Absolutely. It was you. That is why my politics, I always say to people, Uguti, we are just in a chain of historical fights. We are the next link. Because if you went to the 1960s and you looked at President Mandela, President Mandela was fighting a similar struggle with Martin Luther King in the US.
Yeah.
Was fighting a struggle for equality everywhere in the world. It was a struggle. When we look at today, we realize Uguti, there were people like Bears No Dear who stood up to Afrikaners and said the system of apartheid is evil. Let's bring change. Tina, we are just simply that next link. We just take, because the struggle for non-racialism is not something that we invented. It has a legacy from people who have always been fighting for that thing. That's why Mandela could comfortably say, I oppose black and white domination.
Yeah.
That statement itself wasn't to say blacks were not oppressed. It was to say, Uguti, in the midst of that oppression, may the future never be a recycling of a dominance of one race over another. That's why Martin Luther King could, even in the midst of a segregation of African Americans, still hold on to the dream that says, may my children be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skins. So when you frame it in that way, you can appreciate it. We must take up that question and say, who are the ones who are left behind? Who are the ones who are excluded? Why are they not finding jobs? Why are people still today? The education of black kids is still today an issue that Maui Pegisi Sagahle. You can see, Uguti, if you don't have money in this country, you are going to get an education that is inferior. And others would even say, Uguti, even Verwoerd at his cleverest could not conceive of some of the outcomes of education we are seeing today. And it pains me, Uguti, there are still children, when you compare the prospects of a child who grows up in Soweto and the prospects of a child who grew up in Stellenbosch pre-1994, those prospects are still the same.
Yeah.
So when we say we want to dismantle a system of exclusion, may it be such that we keep that fight consistently, because when you live here, we're Mlaz, we're elsewhere. You arrive there, you think to yourself, why is development falling behind here? We must fight that system.
Why is it taking so long?
Wait, all of those
to
issues.
redress the imbalances of the past, like in education situation? Why is it taking so long?
Because the biggest failure
Mm,
of the recent government
mm,
is that we failed to build a very capable and competent government.
mm,
You know, in simple terms,
mm,
if mina now we go, I don't play golf, mhlambe when you play because you're in this beautiful city, but if mina now we go play golf and I give you plastic ones and I take proper ones.
mm,
Mangishaya mina, you'll see ukuthi my distance is further, even if I don't know what I'm doing, because the
mm.
clubs are stronger. If I give you plastic ones, if I gave Tiger Woods plastic ones,
Yeah.
I'm sure I would beat them. So the tools you use are as important as the leadership you provide.
Mm,
The capability of the state is so poor at the moment
mm,
that it cannot direct anything. And let's be honest. Whether you say to me, we're going to go to the Home Affairs and apply for something, you will arrive there and discover that the Home Affairs itself is now slowing down in its capability to deliver basic documentation.
mm,
So when you then come into the classroom, we are now in that cycle where we even have teachers who for many of them, they've never seen a good lesson.
mm.
So they repeat what they grew up under. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are not going to, until we build capability of government so that there's integrity in the state. People can trust the state. At this point, we all think the state is corrupt.
Mm,
In fact, Mauyema Poi saying, uhamba ne 50 rand, because you think to yourself, for this to be investigated, I must pay somebody. Now, when there's no competence in the state, there's no confidence in the state,
mm,
and you end up in a place where the state cannot direct issues,
mm,
then you are not going to address or redress anything. Because even if you said one of the imbalances of the past to fix would be to, let's say, change the education system or change the
Yeah.
economic infrastructure or invest in infrastructure, particularly where the apartheid spatial legacy left people without infrastructure. You need a state that when you wake up and you say, we're going to build infrastructure, yeah, it must be able to be done. And then we started there. So it's not like it's not within us to be able to do.
So I see your echoes with some clapping. Maybe you'll differ with this one. Maybe the system that we are using, the capitalism, that will always promote individualism. Individualism, you see higher armor services, the exploitation at the same time. I'm on my own. Like you take your kids to better schools, understand, and forget lezi ngane lezi ey'suke egazi akusalekile ngalutho lo ngenxa ye-system of economy egcina promote this corruption we are talking about, eyenza le state or le government yethu iy'thole isi-caught up-ke kulabo ngalama individuals agcine seyintshontsha because worried after 5 years ngiyaphuma. Understand, kungena omunye umuntu angiphume vele ngi-right so that ngizosustain impilo yami, ngathi kade today ngiyimeya uBlose imeya sephumile kubeni imeya usekhomba phezulu segibela iteksi. I understand leyo.
Sure.
So I don't know, but ngokwe-system ukuthi uyayivuma noma first sithathe i-socialism mhlambe.
No, I think ukuthi once you start lapho uthi let's contrast capitalism and socialism in how they sit. I think sometimes I've listened carefully to this argument, Yoguti. In a capitalist environment, you outsource services to the markets, and markets themselves become pernicious to social services and public goods. I think once we swim in those waters, we forget Yoguti. We can sometimes obfuscate Yoguti, where does corruption effectively come from? Corruption, I stand with people like even President Mbeki, who made the case to say corruption before there's corruption, there's two things: cynicism and incompetence. Cynicism in that we fail to recognize that the resources that we have were set up so that we can bring development and improve the quality of life of our people. Incompetence in that you need to make sure the system is weak, it can't police corruption. So that can we build a website? By mailing a website, no 10 million. then siyavumelana ukuthi website is 10 million. I mean, in any universe, there's no website for 10 million.
Yeah.
So once that incompetence is within the system and it's corrupted, then we lose track. We start to look at whether it's socialism or capitalism. What I would argue is that let's build competence in the state. Let's make sure we can police the corrupt, but deliver on the objectives that we can. I find it strange, the municipality is outsourcing the cutting of grass. When's umasipala the rest of the time, honestly? We must reflect on that question, because it matters. We must also say to ourselves, in all systems, there are certain things that I would think a partnership between public and private can be far more effective at delivery and the development of people. So when you look at countries that have moved themselves up, South Africa, perhaps maybe best, you can compare us and Singapore. Singapore have got a very capable state. Very capable. In fact, that's a signature of Singapore. But you also recognize in their partnerships how they've been able to build infrastructure, airports, so that systems can thrive. Today, we talk about a very effective thing there. So, Mina, if you ask me, what would Maimane want to do? I want to build that capability of the state. I want to ensure that state can ensure that at the center of development, we have an agenda that keeps things so that citizens can thrive. You want to thrive. Everyone wants to thrive.
Yeah,
so let me use another example. No one is going to thrive when the lights are on or off.
Yeah.
So that you can't say, let's blame capitalism for that. You have to say to yourself, we failed at ESCOM to keep the lights on. And let's do that. You might say, well, corruption is outsourcing, all of those kinds of things, but it's an incapability of the state. That's why I want us to build a system upon which we can say, in partnership, public-private, we can achieve developmental objectives. Mina, I'm very strong on that, and I believe in it. That's why I've always said, even at ESCOM, there's a way of fixing that. The ports here in Durban, give Maimane the opportunity. We're going to make sure they are more efficient, but we're going to have public-private so that we can have a combination of both, so that goods can start to move in and out.
Yeah. Exactly. No, Mmusi Maimane leader ye build one SA. Ikhona la ezindlini zokusakaza kwethu i-podcast affirmation, the fastest growing. Tell your friends about the podcast affirmation. Sifika ngasikale yekile 2.5 ku Facebook. Usilandele wenze sure ukuthi uyasilandela. Sikhuluma leader yeboss uMmusi Maimane. My name is Sizwe Plose. In terms of ukupolisa state, but abanye abantu bazothi athengilele lesinye emsakazo ngidriver la side. Yabona into abakhuluma ngayo, bakhuluma ngokuthi thina we debate a lot, we argue a lot, but in terms of implementation we end up not even implementing. Kunama recommendations azondo commission othola ukuthi even manje kuyophela iterm akukaze ku-implement, and instead baze ba-highlight-a nje ukuthi nenye ye-deputy minister, lo muntu lo wenza leyo nto, kuna this dark cloud hanging over his head.
Yes.
But this particular person is a deputy minister. What is your take in kanjalo?
No, and if failure yethu, we have a parliament that's become captured, still is captured. The parliament
By
is,
who?
You see, it's captured by two things. It's captured by
Stellenbosch.
It's captured in many ways by party dominance, ANC, in that deployees that end up in parliament forget umsebenzi wabo. You see, the system is bad. Kabanga, in the ANC, kune list. It's ranked. When you are higher up in the list, you are in the cabinet. When you are lower in the list, you are in parliament. But our governance framework says parliament is the apex of accountability. Judges are appointed there, everything's the apex of account. The president is elected from parliament.
Yeah.
So Mawi now the people who are high up on the list, bazalape parliament to come and report to people who are lower than them in the party. bayahlala la bayabukana. Oh, you want to talk to me about policing? When I go back to the party, you are lower down. We must deal with you. So that capture of the system does not achieve accountability. It's not just my view, or President Motlanthe would tell you exactly the same thing, because we don't have an inbuilt accountability mechanism. So when the Zondo Commission is handed over to the president, he is already complicit. It should not have been. The Zondo Commission, because the president went to the commission and said, accused number one is the ANC. His words. Why do you give him the report? Unigitsotsi, who has already said, I'm leading criminals. And you say to them, Nazoge, go at. You can't do that. We should have known up front with his compromise. There should have been a body established to effect those. And Parliament.
renewal.
Not renewal. State capture has continued in front. Because the system is baked into why state capture must continue.
So what do you read into Umbalola and other ministers?
Nothing is going to happen. Why?
By Umthunzi Mtav.
Umthunzi has raised serious allegations. Serious.
Why am I for the case as far as you are concerned?
Because I think...
Because those allegations, as we are affirming, they are serious. Why then I for the case?
Because I think now, sekefana nabantu abaningi like South Africa who know what once you open a case, it arrives in the Minister of Police, and the Minister of Police, you know, you end up in a space where the system does not produce accountability. Mangafika manje ngithathe rob you, ngithathe equipment ngihambe. You can go open a case in the police station. If I'm politically connected, what then happens? Nothing happens. So if it's simple in simple things, today, Baba, yazi, we are watching on television, the case of Senzo Meyiwa still carrying on. Who AKA was murdered here. No one is doing anything. So we can look at these highlighted crimes, celebrity crimes. But the truth is,
angithi bayibeka kahle bathi banawo ama-leads manje. Ngicela ukwenza i-example ngeka AKA. Sebenawo ama-leads, but into that they are trying to circumvent a situation whereby they will arrest people, and only to find that, because I think the patience on our part, let us be patient.
How can we
I don't know.
I disagree fundamentally. We cannot be patient where conviction rate of murder in this country is less than 1 in 5. You can't be patient in that universe. It means your chances of committing murder and getting away with it are closer to about 75%, etc. It is illogical. We have a murder crisis in this country. 70 people are being murdered daily in this country. You can't. So when somebody wakes up and you've got leads, you need to know. I'm tired of those things. Because, so to come back to the earlier issue, is on the commission, when we take the report, we put it in Parliament. Bazos Jelly story. Speeches, the president will start off by saying, I've made recommendations. Sizolinda. We will see. Parliament doesn't do its job because it's controlled and it's managed. When you want to say, what is my analogy of the ANC in South Africa? It's like that husband who is sleeping with everybody. He brings flowers. There's are flowers. Kolani, I'm not that bad.
So nina ngizokwenza example, ngiyazi ukuthi uphumile kube ni-MP and stuff, usuzobuyela manje kule after mhlawumbe ama-elections, but nina as ama-MPs, because una experience as opposition parties, are you failing to hold the executive accountable?
The second thing about this,
because I don't know whether we are skipping in the guys, we are not proceeding with the Parliament today. My actions, my recommendations as all. We cannot continue, but President provide ubani uyalanda amaphoyisa ubani, they must speed up the process because our recommendations are gone.
The first problem is that the system esinayo of electing members of parliament. That's why I went to court to fight for the amendment of the electoral bill. Ngithi people must vote directly for abantu so that they can vote directly for the president. Because when you arrive in parliament, they use their majority to railroad mad things. I can use a bad example and say, I can remember women debate is serious amongst adults, leaders, saying, "Wuti, no, this thing is it's not a swimming pool, it's a fire pool."
Yeah, I remember.
Women debate, baba. Cabanga, ibe serious. You vote. No, it's a swimming pool. Amanyati, it's a fire pool. Go to us voting. We vote to say it's a fire pool. Cabanga. When you read the report, this thing is a fire pool. And they've agreed and they've written a report to say it's a fire pool. No, that's majoritarianism.
Yeah.
And Zuguti eventually, even if uhleli inside the party and you think ukuthi Marman Benkos, it's not a fire pool. Mongathi uyavota ukuthi is swimming pool. Oh, phela nga.
But umuntu politics is a game of numbers. Now you just go and convince masses to vote you to outnumber laba bakhona.
That's the job we've got to do. But what we also can't do is that we must introduce another majority ezovota ukuthi amakubuza ukuthi kunemali esofeni esephalaphala ukuthi ayikho imali ebizwa ukuthini ukuthi no, there's no phalaphala. We can vote on that issue. I mean, parliament went and voted to say report judge judge, that report cannot be accepted. Have you ever heard of something absurd? And even the people who then even the people who then eventually voted against that report will face disciplinaries. So you can't take one system, you can't play in the same system, just change the colors. Say, okay, we are replacing black, green, and gold, we are going to add new colors. Now, so okay, use the same system, you'll achieve. The outcomes will remain the same because tomorrow another president is going to rise up, wrong, and then go back to the caucus. If President Maimane comes in, I don't want to go to a Bossa caucus. Wrong. Right.
So it's a question of a same street, different address.
So what I want is for us to change the system so that people can be able to come to parliament. Maybe vote, especially on things. Look, here I must exercise my right and know I'm not going to get fired. The system is very similar to the British system. We adopted some practices. When you look at the British system, because they are constituency based, even if I'm a member of the Conservatives or Labour, if the Labour leader does something wrong, or Boris Johnson did something wrong, in a party during lockdown, during lockdown, we can't even fire those people. But he went to a party. His party came back and said, "You said you broke down lockdown regulations. We're going to vote and have you removed. Today is not the Prime Minister." Why is that thing in South Africa? Umuntu minds into wrong, we can vote to remove them.
I think it's because mhlambe labo basanawo nembeza. I need to understand ukuthi say Ramaphosa uzothi today no right mina ngifuna ukuphuma. Ngizophuma mina mhlambe ngiyalibona iphutha la amatshela ama members akhe.
Yes.
And ama members akhe because ancike kuRamaphosa kanjalo ama positions. Lokho kusho ukuthi if uRamaphosa bephuma zilala uyaca. Understand a lot. Ngoba abantu abazo-affected. Understand a lot. And then babe sebemconvince otherwise. And agcine ehlala.
So to your earlier point, into efuneke siyenze ukuthi we must upgrade ukuthi obani abayosimela eParliament. You know, when I resigned from Parliament, I resigned to unemployment. Then Sati and a big 350. So I literally left on that basis. But I was confident that you've got 2 master's degrees, so I got a PhD. I can be useful as elsewhere. Now, when you've got MPs who say, I can't do anything else, this is the only job I have. You can appreciate ukuthi izinto mazimoshakala. They are not going to be able to, they are going to vote for their stomachs rather than vote for the country. And we must fix that situation by making sure that we've got members of parliament who are there for public service, not for job creation. We must address that issue, because otherwise, that's why I always say, I maintain, we must have minimum qualifications for people to be in parliament. We must also upgrade. If you figure lapaya and say, I don't have qualifications, let's upgrade you, because then we have leaders who are able to work elsewhere. Because even the parliamentary term, it's 5 years. Don't expect to go to eBay pension uzothi 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. Uzogcina ubulala abantu just to stay in parliament.
And it's happening.
Yeah, you must be free to say, look, I've done my 5 years or I've done my 10 years. I feel I must go contribute elsewhere in society.
Sisahleli naye Mmusi Maimane, leader yebosa, igama lami ngosizo plus representing i-podcast affirmation. Ngifuna ukubuyela back lapha Mmusi, ngi-check ukuthi uke waba kuma-branch yini le ngaka ekwenze, because bengikulalela unarrator le story sakho ngiyabona ukuthi umuntu o-black conscious, uclear ngama-issues. Yini le ekwenze wayishiya i-ANC? Wabona ukuthi i-ANC akusiyo bathina abantwana baka-Israel khona wasithatha wasisa, kodwa awazi asithatha sifake kuphi eJordan sizwe lesithembiso.
Kufanele kube njalo. Kufanele kube njalo. It is natural ukuthi kufanele kube noMoses ongeke asilethe in the promised land. Kube noJoshua osithatha asisekhona. ANC played its role in South Africa. I can't change that.
As a liberation
movement. And uma seyifika njalo, it pains me even namhlanje mawuyibona into enzakala phakathi kwe-ANC. It was in 2008, 2009. It was a time of transition from President Mbeki to President Zuma at the time, with President Motlanthe transitioning the two. I realized that delivery is no longer taking place. We are now truly entering into a shadow state where umsebenzi kahulumeni is not the main job. Your private interests are. So not only did I realize that the ANC was now corrupted, you began to see that they don't even have a plan for the liberation of all South Africans. That plan doesn't exist. At the time, you'll remember
existing Mandela, some debates Mandela not declared plan. Plan. Declared he must produce. What about the 5-year plan?
Yes.
Declare produce your plan. Declare, I think I will produce a plan. You understand? The man who could ANC the plan. He failed to plan because
remember, and you'll remember under President Mandela there was the RDP, Reconstruction and Development Program. President Mbeki introduced.
I think Joseph, if you remember.
But talking about plans, we then went from Abu Gie, Askisa, and then it culminated to the vision, which is the National Development Plan. Once that is done, since then, you can't sitting here with me say what the plan ka President Ramaphosa is. Can't tell me. No, even anyone will tell you. So that's why when I go into politics, I say, boss has got a 10-point plan. We've got to keep the lights on, make sure that we build own operate systems. We've got to ensure we deal with crime by bringing police lower down, stop making it.
Still a boss, man.
He plan. So I don't want to criticize others and say they don't have a plan. That's the plan.
No 7 cardinal pillars. No freedom chart. But identify wrong, but I can mean achieve them ngokuthi ngivulele my own political party ukuthi ngidile nazo, and the stamp of approval who mandated you to do that. Ngiyakhumbula ama-consultation and sonke sasicabanga ukuthi uzohlangana no-Herman Mashaba one way or the other. Usuzosala usungi-enlighten-a
So that's why
what went wrong even into that pact enaninayo in a way. No, Mashaba.
we started, we said, without ideology, let's not start there. Let's start with values.
Yeah.
Society is organized around values. When you wake up in the morning, you think, what do you value? You either value your health, you value your family, you value something. What are the values in society that we want to bring? The value we want to bring is the value of Ubuntu, because Ubuntu is the idea that says, Uti, I see you are a fellow human being before I see any other thing. We share common threads. Because once you have that value, because once we share that common value, it means naturally, we can't be racist, we can't be sexist, we can't be any other thing. The second thing is we said, well, what then is the vision for IPOSA? The vision for IPOSA is to build a South Africa upon which all men and women can prosper together and live together peacefully. How do you achieve that vision? We said, here is the 10-point plan. The 10-point plan starts with, let's fix ESCOM. That's about keeping the lights on, introduce, build on operate systems, make sure Utumbane becomes cheaper by creating competitive models by renewables.
So ESCOM.
We said, let's fix logistics because you need infrastructure to do that. Transnet, let's create a public-private partnership so that logistics in the country can function more effectively. Otherwise, your economy cannot grow. We said the third thing is let's keep people safe. The safety plan says, Uguti, let's devolve powers of policing so that we can bring them closer to provinces. Remember in 94, there was a conversation about that, but people didn't want that because they feared good provinces will have their own armies, quote unquote. So let's bring
federal
correct
of some
but
sort.
let's bring policing down. Why? Because crime competence and intelligence surely must be located at a local level, because it's different in KZN as it will be in Gauteng, as it will be in Western Cape, whatever that thing is. So we know what types of crimes are occurring where, who are the criminals, because crime is not committed by many people. It's committed by a few people many times. That's why prison doors are revolving doors. Prisoners get arrested, they go in, they come out, they commit more crime. We revolve the door. So let's bring it lower down and fix the criminal justice system. I said, let's look at how we deal with corruption.
That is number
4.
Number 4 now.
So we look at issues of corruption by saying, look, we're going to introduce specialized corruption courts so that we can broaden the mandate of the SIU so that we can be much more effective institutionally. We said to ourselves, we want to introduce, rather than national health insurance, let the state become the underwriter of insurance so that you have a program where if you are not well, but the closest to you is a private doctor, you should be able to consult with that private doctor and the state will become an underwriter of that. We said in education, let's introduce a voucher system that allows for parents to exercise the choice.
So before you skip to the track, the one that you're mentioning, NHI.
No, ANC was the National Health Insurance, which is a totally different system.
Okay, no, sure.
The NHI is they borrowed certain model. Now I'm looking at a model whereupon the state is the underwriter, not the primary provider of healthcare.
No, sure.
We then look at issues of education and say to ourselves, look, in education, we want to give parents vouchers the right to choose. Because in a school, if you are born in a school, in a community that's poor, and I say to you, the only school you can go to is that school, because of feeder area. If the school is useless, that means your education is also useless. Let's be fair. But if I give you a voucher, let's make sure, Guti, you can shop around, you can choose what's the best school for you, you can subsidize that, and we can go from there. We've said we want to introduce a national civilian service, which means that we want young people to spend a year after school, spend a full year, spending 6 months of internship and 6 months of work. We want to, even on telecoms and making sure, because that's the third aspect of massive infrastructure that you need to grow any country. Your telecoms, we want to reduce data costs so that you can ensure connectivity of citizens so that they can go. We've also looked at, ultimately, when you look at even areas like housing, you know, when you are poor in this country, the government tells you what kind of house you can live in. I mean, I want poor people to exercise their choice. Let's also give the state to act as a lender or a bank in that sense, so that people can take out money, be able to go build their own homes, and they can decide how they want it. Because corruption eventually leads us to a point where we give to service providers who build substandard houses and scheme on costs.
Baphuthumisa profit.
That's correct.
Ngayo le system atengisho ngayo.
And then I'm going to introduce what is called a Jobs and Justice Fund, because I'm aware, Guti, there's an injustice in this country. So if there are companies who have benefited under apartheid, they must contribute through an additional tax pool into this Jobs and Justice Fund. And we use the Jobs and Justice Fund to not only fund educational outcomes of people, but stimulate new entrepreneurs who are coming into the market. When you do that, you create a system where, when it's said and done, more and more people are able to participate in the economy. And then I've always said, I'm passionate about the township economy, because, and we will put 200 billion rands into the township economy to make sure, Guti, that economy functions well. Why is that important? It's not because I'm trying to keep people away from other places. It's because when you are a mother and you have to wake up at 4 a.m. and travel far to a place of work and come back late, who's raising your children? Whereas if we put up call center infrastructure, manufacturing capabilities in townships with tax incentives to make sure that we zero rate tax so that infrastructure can be built there, you achieve a space where that mother can work closer to home, or that father. I don't want to sound discriminatory as to who should be the primary provider, but I'm just saying my children benefit by me being able to work, live closer to where they go to school, so that when they need something, I'm there. So it's about the reform of society. So we've got tangible.
So ihlukile kunalesho ANC, because I understand ukuthi uLebohang Maile eJohannesburg nabo bayayiphusha into township economy le yebosa ihlukile kuneyabo.
Ihlukile because they don't have levers to introduce tax incentives. They don't have levers to say what are the other infrastructural demands that are needed in townships. They don't have any of that. They don't have a fund to stimulate micro enterprise in townships. Mina, I want your car, Baba. It can't just be fixed in the Tiger Wheels and Tire, Yase Gateway. It must be fixed even in the townships where wheel alignment can be done. We can create the appropriate program in that regard. So Mina, I want to reform South Africa so that when I say build one South Africa, that vision must be able to say, development that takes place in Gateway or whatever that community is, or Durban North, cannot be better and surpassed by better than town development that takes place in Mlazi.
Max.
Baba.
Max.
Zodlula khona.
Okay.
So
we plan, man.
No. I've covered as many as I can.
But because abanye abantu bayasithumelela ama questions abo, I understand. I think khona obuzayo nje ukuthi, according to you, boss, how do we repossess our dispossessed in terms of land now?
Yeah, of course, land is an important issue.
Because kule 10-point plan yakhumbula angakayizwa ukuthi because the unfortunate part ukuthi still 87% of land apparently still owned, or is in the hands of the few, but the majority still by ideologize lo mhlaba wethu and all that
it's
stuff.
Why when I introduced this Jobs and Justice Fund, the One South Africa Redress Program, is because I want to ensure, especially land is a fascinating issue, because you have a balance. There are some people that say bafuna umhlaba because they want land for agricultural purposes, or also to reclaim where they restitution. Abantu bethu were buried there. We want that land. That program must be accelerated. It must happen. But when it comes to agricultural land, we must think about it differently. We must say to ourselves, how do we empower those who are working within the farm itself so that they are owners of the farm? And so what you then do is you create a system, a model where you say, if you've been working on a farm, you must create equity within that farm. So those people own that land. Because even if you go from the Freedom Charter, it says those who work the land must own the land. This idea, Yoguchi, when but I must give you the farm you've never seen in your life, doesn't quite work. And then I think we must accelerate the use of state land as a redistributive tool so that we can empower citizens who are left outside. So, Owethu Msebenzi, when it comes to land restitution, land redistribution, is that I want to accelerate that program, but it doesn't fall apart because of policy. It falls apart because the government is not capable to achieve that.
So you're against land grabs?
I am, because land grabs occur like this, actually. People want work opportunity. That's what people want. So what happens is we urbanize in a way that's uncontrolled and unplanned for. Let me take you to Tshwane. When you arrive in Tshwane, you urban sprawl. Tshwane is one of the third largest cities in the world from an urban sprawl point of view. Why? Because we've allowed it to just sprawl out. People come, they live in the periphery of the town. They grab the land. They live there. We haven't planned infrastructure there. We haven't built infrastructure there. And so naturally, it is seen as land grabs, but it's people seeking for opportunity. That's what people are looking for. And also, it also means people are living from places where opportunity has shifted, because district and rural municipalities are so poor that the capability of agriculture and manufacturing is collapsing. And you can go to places where companies like Clover, who are invested in rural communities to be able to uplift those communities, can't, because the rural municipality is falling apart. They can't produce the jobs. They can't pay the electricity. So the companies shut down. What do you want for someone who's now living in a rural community starving? They naturally move to the city.
So go by question now, urbanization.
It becomes urbanization and urban sprawl that is unplanned for, uncontrolled. Mina, I don't oppose the idea. One of the things we've got to do as a country is think, when I talk about bulk infrastructure, where are the new cities are we building? I'm telling you now, give President Maimane a chance. I'm going to build new cities. Why? Because when you build a new city,
president ekhuluma nge-new city lapho ngase le airport eseJoburg, le airport le yayibona OR kodwa yini le
we are, I remember that whole conversation.
Yeah.
He
was
correct, but he wasn't. He was correct in thinking, but typical in its fullest ukuthi how can it effectively work? Because the criticism wasn't the new city. The criticism was, in fact, ukuthi there are cities that your government governs. You want to build new cities, but you can't even fix these ones. So that was the issue.
Yeah.
So
much awukwazi ukuthatha call umfonele president usho imicabango yakho, like,
no,
because besibuka eParliament, your relationship ebeninayo ne-president, I understand ngoba phela fine criticize and all that stuff, but kuyaye kube ne-soft spot futhi, you can tell ukuthi these people at least understand that bakabuyela back door bayixoxe ezinye izinto.
Besikhona ukukhuluma until he became obsessed about intra-party politics while in South Africa. And then in that case, I've even said it in public. I said it when he was elected. I'll support you when the agenda is South Africa. But I won't support you when the agenda is the ANC. I'm not an ANC member, so why would I,
So aware ukuthi now omunye wabalete elected president bangamthandisisi kwicountry.
Ubani?
Upresident bangamthandisisi kwicountry.
Senzeni.
Aware ukuthi now omunye wabo, I think abakhoze that thing because of that question. I think 500
yes. No, but I always said, and it was one of the difficult issues.
Yeah.
You can't. No, President Zuma knew. President Zuma knows I respected him, but he knew when it came to accountability, I never shy. He knew what I would challenge him. So why should Mbambe President Ramaphosa with some kitted gloves? No, we can't. Accountability is accountability. And I feel ukuthi manje, the opposition is really failing at that issue. It's failing at being able to, because it's not just the corruption in Palapa. It's the other issues. Why is Parliament, yazi ngifuna ukubathumela ama posturepedic, ama silly, balale kamnandi, because of, we saw things going mad during COVID. Nothing is being done. And the system is such that the apex of accountability is Parliament. We are seeing this Pala thing. There are conflicting reports and reports that must be challenged. So because Parliament has become so poor, what happens is that everything now goes to courts. Now we are being run by courts. Because
choice.
Because
you're
exactly.
not receiving joy, because
now I will go to court, because
exactly.
you have to go to court. But the dilemma is the courts themselves don't want that job, because it's not the court's job to write laws, prosecute. No, Parliament must do its job. Let's fix Parliament. Let's build a capable state. Let's right now, by now, we must be having a different discussion, Yoguti. How effective does the government work?
Yazi sisehleli noMmusi Maimane webosa build the 1SA la we podcast affirmation Sizwe is my name. Musi khona obuzayo futhi ukuthi nizoyenza kanjani loku-addressa indaba yomsebenzi, especially kwe-youth. I-youth ayisebenzi, and ikuthanda ukuba dangerous ukungasebenzi kwe-youth, because iyakwazi futhi loku-revolt if isimo ngempela ubone ukuthi si-unbearable. As ibhosa yini eniyimisele ngokuyenza ukuthi bese nithathile oba nithatha nini na next year, like
2024 asiye
niyathatha next year
asiyeni for young people next year, because I want young people to come out and know that this is their country. That's mean I want to tell you, I always say to young people, I'm married to one wife, we have 3 children. Once those 3 children can vote, 18, even in Zini, we have a conference, Uguti, do we want chicken or do you want beef? If they vote, by a win. It's not that my vote is counting more than theirs. Because if the 3 of them agree, I'm not veto. Even in our democracy in this country, young people must remind themselves, Uguti, I get one veto. Aguna vote ebalwa 3. It's the same, 1-1. Young people must know that, and they must go, because they're in the majority. The median age of Africa is 23. There are young people in this country. Young people, if they are registering, we can get 18s, 19, they must go register to vote. Because mabengaza ngobuningi babo siyayithatha le country. Siyayithatha so that we can deliver on the very things about esizibhekile. So my proposal for
organization enjenge-ANC enjenge-ANC othola ukuthi i-liberation movement, so to speak, uzongilekelela, because most of ama-African countries anama-liberation movements aseyagcina sekuyiyona akuyi-helm yelokhuzana ye-states or government. Yiphi leke yakhishwa ngempela kwathiwa le ihlulekile, ayiphume whether ngevote or ngani, ngoba we always complain after ama-elections kune-outtake to Chamisa eZimbabwe. Kuba sengathi uyawina. After that concluding ukurika kwama-elections, khona i-out ewumculi laphana e-Uganda, if I'm not mistaken. That guy. Naye futhi kuba sengathi uyawina. Museveni Museveni abuye athathe. Understand that? I think same thing nako Mozambique. If Frelimo is still there, understand that? Oh, you need to bazama kuphi, but bayahluleka. Sengisho i-point engizama ukulisho ukuthi
ngiyakuzwa, but I think also we mustn't forget places like Zambia. You know, Hakainde Hichilema, who's the current president now, in fact the party kaunda don't even feature in the elections. So that's one country we can look at. Singaibheka in other parts, even in Zimbabwe. The truth is, Zimbabwe by 2007, 2008, by the time Morgan Tsvangirai was a very good friend of mine, they had won that election.
So rest in peace.
Hey, Baba. He was a man. But they had won that elections until we decided we need GNU government of national unity,
Yeah.
which didn't help. I do think ukuthi uma usuyibhekisisa the job we've got to do. Senegal, Macky Sall, they've been able to see transition democratically. It's going to happen more and more. It has to happen more and more. Meaning, all of these things happen in waves. You'll remember in the 80s, there was a wave of liberation parties taking control.
Yeah.
And Mozambique, you then ended up with Mugabe was the last, and South Africa was delayed. So Mugabe with a liberation. But now we are also seeing the next wave because the next wave is now. So you can go to Malawi. Lazarus Chakwera has just won an election there. Sam Matakatsa, new in Lesotho, just won an election there. I'm confident Uguti, in Botswana, we should see a change after Masisi because there's a new frame that's coming through that the opposition is strengthening there. I've already mentioned Zambia. We can have a look at places like Tanzania and Angola. There are many movements there that are starting to happen. In fact, I'm traveling to Dar es Salaam itself to have a look at new formations there and take it from there.
But Musi, laba bantu wine, abanjengo Chamisa, isikhathi esiningi bahlanganiswa ngathi they are being used by i-West ukuthi ba-impose ukuze ikwazi penetrate that particular country and ifeze iy'dingo zayo. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but they are branded like that.
I know Chamisa well.
Yeah.
He is a personal friend and a dear brother who's fighting the opposition. Remember,
is it genuine?
I used to work with the opposition. We set up an organization called the Partnership for Democratic Change.
Yeah.
The problem is not the West. The problem is the failure of SADC and the African Union to protect democracy. Let's look at Zimbabwe. The vice president of Zambia went on an observer mission to Zimbabwe. He declares he can't say the elections were free and fair. And Africa stood and said, look, we're not even going to attend inauguration. Who went? Ramaphosa was one of them, one of three who went. Going to affirm an illegal election, in my view, because the observer mission says the thing is fraud. So if the ANC
or evidence,
if you can't trust the observer mission, the elections are not free and fair. Because that's who you deploy to a country to observe and make sure the systems work. Now, how can South Africa sit and then SASA, we are going to complain, hey, we've got too many Zimbabweans in the country. But we failed to go to Zimbabwe when we are told the elections are free and fair. Ramaphosa is the only one of three heads of state. Sometimes party and no one is there. You must ask, what kind of party is this that no one feels to go? But our president felt
akuthusi ukuthi uRamaphosa ubelesela ukuthi no, even ama-coalitions akasayingeni indaba yawo bazowina overwhelmingly kulolu khetho lelo esiyakulona.
It worries me because the capacity IEC is being stretched. The IEC are the safeguard for the elections. Funeke senze umsebenzi as much as we can. That's why I would call upon all opposition parties. We must work together and collaborate.
But when we multi-party,
no. Angidingi uba multi-party chart.
No, essentially, they are trying because there is this elephant. This elephant that cannot win. We back if
as an individual. Bashota nge 2 million votes. Leo 2 million votes angeke bayithole bahlangene. It's not going to happen. Tina sithe, well, let's go get those votes. So ihlanganisa so that we can stabilize the country. Because if it's just in that charter, you're told some votes, but they are not enough to get over 51%. We are short. Let's get the ones that are missing. That's my job. And in Funa Abantu, wherever they are, South Africans, black and white, to say, I'm tired of what's been going on. Sibaniki Kailish. because ngifuna bazofika bathi I share the values zika Maimane. I share clean governments. I want a plan. I want those are the things I want.
So ANC for argument's sake iyawina-ke I win ngendlela ifuna isupport ye-boss.
Manje singakhuluma ke. We can speak
Ungakhuluma
because now we have that 2 million votes that we know which now we can dictate. Otherwise, if we don't do that, the only people who can be available for ANC can be EFF or whatever. And I'm saying no, but we must have those votes so that behlali beyazi ukuthi if we use what we
awunayo that anger towards ANC, open for ama discussion.
Anginayo leyo anger because of I'm aware ukuthi it's like siphuma lapha
or your blood is still green.
Ungangenzi njalo baba. No, I don't have that bitterness. You know, I've never been driven by bitterness. I've never. Ngisho ne DA, I can speak to the DA.
Yeah.
I don't have that bitterness. Enenzondo. You know, there are other people. Oh, you mentioned the NC, they are angry. You mentioned the DA, they are angry. Well, anger does not.
Awenze ukuthi umuntu kaNkulunkulu.
Mhlawumbe. But ngithanda uNkulunkulu, ngithanda South Africa. I want to build a South Africa engithi. Let our hopes be the driver, not the anger. Because politics of anger, kusasa ngizofika laba bangikwatile and hate you. That's
Mr. Maimane, angifuni ukukubuza ukuthi i-relationship yakhe njani noHelen Zille ne-DA. But ngiyafuna ukubuza ukuthi ngiyafuna ukusho ukuthi ujoyine i-DA kwakungekho fashionable. Ujoyine i-DA. Unqwaba abantu abamnyama bajoyina i-DA bebona this young guy or eloquent and stuff. However, bese uhamba futhi, you don't take it as a betrayal to those people obayisile lapha. Mhlawumbe because sekunebhosa manje. Ikhona yini imizamo yokuthi or usuqalile, I suppose, ukuthi uyabalanda laba bantu bakho ukuthi babuyele manje kwiboss. Angeke yini ubashiye kwiboss asize sekuthiwa uMaimane usebadropile usefuna ukuyiphushela izifundo zakhe.
iDA ngayithola isinjalo. We worked hard ukuthi asilethe ushintsho. And then a few people abayibeyenze ngathi yabo didn't want to change. We had to leave them. But that's not a sin because sonke sifuna ukwenza izinto that work for South Africa. Manje ngishilo ngathi kubantu besihamba nabo. Na ibossa. Le yethu. We started it. We built it. We funded it. We sacrificed for it.
By the way, who's funding you guys?
Yeah, we are sacrificing. People, South Africans. But Puma, yazi. I want to tell you something, Baba. Izolo bengise Phoenix. Ngifuna ukukhuluma ngomdu. Umdu is on a wheelchair. He's a disabled South African or ably challenged South African. Yes, Baba, I said, bengimbhekile in the middle of traffic in Phoenix, ephethe ama pamphlet webossa, epusha i-wheelchair yakhe handing pamphlets.
Touching.
I said, I will never complain. Because there he is doing it. Those are the South Africans that have inspired me. Those are the South Africans, but Tata, a little bit that they have. And they say, as if funeke siyothenga ama t-shirt, senze ni plan la. Funeke siyobeka ama poster. We are not a wealthy organization. We speak to donors, we speak to South Africans, and South Africans are coming.
But abanye ama South Africans that's Mmusi wakha ubudlelwano obuhle nabantu abaningi eseku-DA yikho kungathi ku-easy ukuthi aqale ngoba kuthiwa uqala iphathi is not the pub and flay.
It's not, and I won't lie about that. But as in,
but because of your relationship, mhlawumbe umusa nayo no Rupert kuba izanyana.
Ungangibeki no Rupert. Ngifuna ngisho ngithi.
Example.
All I'm saying is, abantu bebeyibona ivision yethu ku-DA. They could see ukuthi this guy really wants South Africa to work. He wants South Africans of different races to work together. Ngisho nabantu abafunda that thing. Mawusuhamba, many of them.
Ubalandile yini oDaki?
Hayi ukuthi oDaki kuphela. Black and white.
Sengisho ukuthi kakhulu oDaki bothi odakhi kakhulu because bebelele bevela kuthiwe uzwakele Mncanga, angazi ukuthi umbiza ngobani uzwakele, but uzwakele Mncanga wajoyina enye organization. Usisi wayese Free State futhi naye washiya, uMbali Ntuli washiya, ubani khona this guy futhi engimkhumbulayo besebenza kakhulu nalo osegoli naye washiya lwafana usevula i-organization yakhe. I think ubethanda ukugqoka ikepisi nje nabo Baloyi, khona omunye wayethanda ukugqoka ikepisi omnyama nje, sengikhohlwe igama lakhe. But bonke labantu after kwavele kwaba sekuba ne-exodus nje of black leaders leaving i-DA,
which we must still one day sibuze i-DA. Ngithemba ukuthi mhlambe baza la ku-podcast affirmation.
No, wena uyona yini awubanga the-influence to these guys and all that stuff.
Babuze ukuthi why are black people not staying inside the DA? That's a really important question. If we understand it. That's why I keep saying to people, the reason Sibene boss is because we don't want parties where a race cannot be accommodated in the organization. But I want to clarify that point because it's an important point.
Yeah.
If politics becomes only for politicians, we will get the same outcomes. When in Skali Boss, we also went out and said, we don't just want politicians. We want business people. We want Ukusta Jack, who's the chairperson of the boss, was an ex-ANC member, led a party called AIM, now is the chairperson of the boss. Boss. We also want deputy leader Unobuntu Hlazo Webster from KZN. She'd never been in politics before. She's a businesswoman.
What's that called? Tamar?
One?
Tamar.
But yes, all South Africans from different walks. I did not want a political party, etatama politicians from other parties, because when you just do that, then it's like we club putting Yolanda, I'm a player from other clubs. That's how it is. Auna development, auna nkubela phambili. You don't have that. We must. Parliament fails because I sometimes think Parliament is stale.
Yeah,
it lacks ideas because there are ideas for business. Why for NHI, Singa Yolanda, people who are, or health insurance, we get people who come from somewhere and then we bring them on board.
Bengifuna ukuchecka Mmusi before uthole platform yokuthi push boss because I understand and like KZN awuzile holiday. It's all about work and nizosebenza la namane crew yakho. I understand that ukuthi ngingakaze ngifike that nizosicanvas. Angazi reason mhlawumbe ukuthi kukanjani.
Ufuna abantu base podcast affirmation 2.5 register next weekend and vote. Vote for boss. Mina ngizoba campaign angila.
Yeah. Ngifuna ukuchecka Mmusi good this thing yenzeka lapha eMiddle East because it's affected. So what affects one direct can affect others indirect in one way or the other. If kulwa Russia and Ukraine, nathi soba affected because nezinto eziningi estraight ngazo and all that stuff.
Of course.
So it take of late si recall abantu not as South Africa. Si recall ama diplomats ethu from Tel Aviv ukuthi abuye and all that stuff. I just want to find out ukuthi as ibossa now because nani phela niyabona into ezenzakalayo ithini take yini kulempi le ese-Middle East ngiyakuzwa okushiwoyo kuthiwa iPalestine eyayo this thing khona ama-politicians nje esemzansi azasifanisa athi thina mhlawumbe sisimo sePalestine abathathelwa iland yayibona le nto yenza kakhona Israel.
Let me highlight indaba ethini. Let's start with first principles. I've traveled both to Palestine and Israel. I've seen both sides. I've met with both sides. So I have an understanding, at least from being on the ground.
Yeah.
You know? So I feel Uguti, in some ways, it helps you get perspective.
Yeah.
In fact, the initial strike in Gaza and where it is, we were at that kibbutz. So I've seen the setup. The first and most important thing is that both groups, Palestinians and Israelis, agree on a two-state solution. They agree on it. Right? So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is we must treat Hamas as a
Yeah.
unique case
Mm.
and not always synonymize Hamas with Palestinians.
City by a terrorist organization.
City, these people are all the same. What sometimes in certain instances, when you saw what Hamas was also doing in Gaza,
Mm.
you could appreciate there were some challenges there,
Mm.
if we're willing to be honest. This provocation that has taken place and the fight that has occurred,
Provocation by Hamas.
at its
to Israel.
beginning, we cannot dismiss the fact that you can't simply launch an attack on people and not expect for them to be able to
Retaliate.
retaliate. Thirdly, we must be clear. So I mean that was a brutal attack. Let's be fair. We must also
So
know
Hamas to Israel now.
correct,
Mm.
and I condemned it.
Mm.
I'm not going to shy away from that point. I condemned it and
Yeah.
still would.
Mm.
As further on going from there, now what we've got to figure out quite quickly is that now that there's a full blown out conflict, we must strive for peace. I don't think the world needs another war. I really don't.
But I think you must equally condemn Israel
When there are
and all that
attacks
stuff.
within
No,
hospitals, schools,
hospitals. And,
we can't be doing that. It's against the law, and we
Yeah.
must make it possible for any humanitarian aid to arrive in places that it needs to get to, so that we can return back to a place of the two-state solution.
Mm.
We've agreed on that. That's what we've got to get back to. But going back historically and said, no, we never agreed on that, that cannot be. It's not going to be sustainable.
Mm.
So we need peace in the Middle East. We need to be strong in making sure that all laws are observed.
Yeah.
And I think the geopolitics broadly,
Mm.
Iran, what is going on with because there are other countries. For example, if you look at the UAE, have gone out and made sure there's a support for Israel. So I don't think it's always as straightforward as just simply saying it's Muslims versus Jews.
Mm.
That's not the fight we are fighting. I think we don't need terror in the world. If there was an issue of Boko Haram in Africa, we'd fight against it. We'd fight against. I still think Hamas is. We cannot be dealing with Hamas. I think we cannot be dealing with ISIS. I think we need to be strong in condemning those things. To synonymize them with a cause legitimizes people.
No, I hear you. Mhlambe, why must I vote Bosa? Convince me mhlambe, in 30 seconds, Mr. Maimane, to vote Bosa.
In short, Bosa is going to put a job in every home, every household in this country. I'm not here to say everybody is going to work, but in every home, we've got to put a job in there. And
but you guys are known by empty promises.
But let me tell you,
politicians, not you.
We're one of them. 30 seconds. Now I've used 10. Now you are in. So we're going to put a job in every home.
Yeah.
The second thing is Bosa as a government in working, not in waiting. I've been going to communities. There are communities without water. I can take you there and show you. We've put a borehole here. We've gone in Dozuma. We are going to put water tanks there because the community doesn't have water. I can take you to Chatsworth. We're doing the same. We're doing in all communities across the country where we feel communities have been left without water. Bosa has said, let's do it. The third is the model here. Bosa is different from any other party. It says, you choose your people. Bosa, iboso, uwe. So what we are saying is, I can't criticize Parliament but not practice it. Tomorrow, when we are revealing candidates, those candidates are people who are chosen from their communities, representing their communities. The people can vote for those candidates, and if those candidates stop working, they can recall them. We give the power back to the people. And ultimately, Bosa will make sure that we have the best capable government led by people of integrity and honesty for the future of this country. That's the job.
Done.
So
asivale Mmusi ngokuthi mhlambe manje ungitshela ukuthi ku-music uMaimane uyasho ukuthi ushadile uney'ngane and all that stuff, but manje urelaxa kanjani? Let's say awukho kwibhizinisi yebosa mhlambe.
Yes, I listen to a lot of jazz. Yes, Babami. I grew up with bands like Istimela.
Mm.
They used to frequent my home a lot in
Is it?
Dobsonville. Nabotapelo Khomo.
Mm.
Yeah, bands like Sankomota were regulars in Soweto. So if you find me chilling, you'll find me a little bit like my father, which worries me a little bit. It tells my age a little bit.
Yeah.
Ngiyaziwarela nami kancane, ngifune ngimamele amapiano, ngimamele and listen to
Ngithi
various.
ngisazokubuza ukuthi Big Zulu or Java for you.
I listen, look. I love music, ubungibonile, but literally, I'm very, if I can chill and listen to that and then play football, that's what I do.
Ngifuna ukubuza nje umuntu ongazi ilida yebhosa ukuthi ilandela iqembu lebhola.
Oh, ngizobuhlungu kakhulu manje ufuna ukuthi ngiveze yazi ipain. Hey, into enzakala eNaturena isizwe sobuhlungu sonke, but amakhosi azobuya bathi ikhosi aliphela umoya.
Ikhosi aliphela umoya abafana basephefeni. Mhlawumbe ungasala usuyisho nje uDr. Akaiza Mtaung I think izolo bebemshaya nge-Hall of Fame. Mhlawumbe
Congratulations.
I think inspiration abantu abaningi.
I've met uChairperson a number of times, a family yakwamtaung. You are never going to meet a more humble South Africans who's contributed immensely to football in this country. He was part of those who professionalized the league. He was part of those who worked hard in making sure that the emblem of South Africa can bring the World Cup here. And even though we celebrate the Springboks, and I don't want to diminish them. I love Abosia and they've done well, rugby's. But let's also face context. The World Cup final is watched by over 2 billion people. So when South Africa could host 2010, we must recognize that achievement. We must celebrate that as much as we celebrate the Springboks. Just being able to host it, not anything else. Just being the host nation. So football and the contribution by many others, of which Ubabumtaung has been one of those, is immense in this country. And so I'm grateful for them. I congratulate the family and City. Let the glory days return, as they say.
So I'm congratulating no state president ngokuthi amahlandla amabili irugby
ungena kuphi hayi yazi uyamkhankasela ungena kuphi
kahle ukuthi amahlandla amabili ephethe le-rugby ithathe amahlandla amabili kuphethe awuyizwanga ikliphu la ekhuluma khona ethi cishe ngashawa inhliziyo cishe ngashawa inhliziyo awubonanga yini esho njalo
no angazi development.
Don't be a player hater.
I'm not being a player hater. Ngithi ungena kuphi
No, asibuya kakhulu Mmusi nothi lesikhona into osafuna ukuyi-eda ngemphosa liyaphi benisuka la ngoba vele si-live
Chatsworth, Phoenix communities kanjalo, and then we are pushing people to register. Young people.
What's your first step, please?
It's the most important step. If you are not registered, it's like not having a driver's license. You can't drive. So if you're not registered to vote, you can't vote. So that's how it is. So let's make sure everyone is registered to vote.
All the best.
2 million votes. Let's get young people.
Ubuye bese niwinile noma ningawinanga.
Mina ngizabe ngila. I can give you that affirmation.
So cool. Till next time.